Good morning or good afternoon. We're going to be starting shortly. We'll give a couple more minutes for people to log in. Sorry? Okay. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on your time zone. I'm Ignacio Dayrit, Director of Programs at the Center for Creative Land Recycling in Oakland, California. I'm very pleased to have you join us today for today's webinar, Sustainable Economic Development Using Brownfields Funding and Land Recycling Tools. We're very excited to present this topic with our speakers. But before that, we have a little housekeeping. Uh, the presentation materials can be downloaded by clicking on the console on the right of your screen. And if you're unable to download the material or have any other questions for us, there's a console on the right side of your screen. You can chat the speakers or the organizers if you have any questions. That's also the spot to type in any questions you may have of any of the panelists. Uh, we will be answering all the questions received after all the speakers have finished their presentations. Uh, a recording of the webinar will be available shortly after the webinar, and we will also send you a survey. And we appreciate your feedback so that we can improve our program. And along with the email we will be sending after the webinar are a couple of links to other webinars that were actually done within the last week, which uh, uh, which touch the subjects that we are talking about, but go into more detail. And rather than repeat the that information, we are providing the links to those webinars because they are timely and it's really suited to our audience today. Um, so moving on, a little bit about the Center for Creative Land Recycling. We're a nonprofit based in Oakland, California, and an office in New York metro area. And we work nationally to provide technical assistance to communities seeking to redevelop underutilized, contaminated, or abandoned land. We do that via workshops and webinars, and we also engage in policy advocacy and research. We have a consulting practice, and we can provide one-on-one assistance via EPA's Technical Assistance to Brownfields Community Program, which lets us work with local government, nonprofit organizations, and their partners to provide them with one-on-one assistance to support projects and programs. Please visit our website and join us on social media because we post quite frequently. And among the many partnership organizations that we work with is the EPA, and which is putting together the Brownfields conference in Los Angeles this December. And there's actually a call out for presentations going on, which will close on May 31st. So if you have any ideas or are interested in participating, give us a call at CCLR and let's see how we can work together. CCLR is also working with partners on the Bright Fields Conference in Sacramento this August. So before we start, we have a couple of polling questions. There is no wrong answer, so please answer the questions that are coming up on the screen. First question is, where are you calling from? Let's see, we have 20% calling from outside California and 31% from outside San Joaquin Valley, and half of you are coming from San Joaquin Valley, so thank you for that. The next question is, which sector do you represent? All right, so roughly a quarter of you are with the public sector, 13% nonprofit, and a lot of you are consultants and developers. So thank you for responding. So developers, please connect with our public sector partners there, because this is what this webinar is all about, connecting you to so you can develop these brownfields. So let's go to the next. So just before we get to our speakers, just a little background information on brownfields, because some of you may not be familiar with brownfields, and some of this is probably basic to a lot of you. So bear with us for a few seconds. So brownfields look like any of these properties. They could be abandoned properties, dry cleaners, old manufacturing or agricultural lands, and the picture on the bottom left, that's affected by mine tailings. So we have one last polling question for you. Actually, second to the last, but the last one comes later on. So question is, true or false, a brownfield is a contaminated site? All right, let's see the response. So 75% of you say false and 25% true. Okay, really, we intended to put a maybe there because the real answer is it really depends. Some brownfield sites, some sites that are contaminated may be considered brownfields and some might not. And I'm just going to go in a little detail on how that works. Next slide. So the legal definition of the EPA is real property. A brownfield is real property, the expansion, redevelopment, or reuse of which may be complicated by the presence or potential presence of a hazardous substance, pollutant, or contaminant. Now, so the key word here is potential, and so practically any site that has a past use may have the presence of a hazardous substance, pollutant, or contaminant. So for all intents and purposes, many of these sites can be considered brownfields. And land recycling and reuse, which we're all here for, involves the reuse of abandoned, vacant, and underutilized properties for redevelopment. So our objective here is to use federal, state, and local tools to revitalize blighted areas. However, there are certain laws that prevent us from using brownfields funds for some contaminated sites. So the real answer there really is false, because not all contaminated sites can use brownfields funds. But still, we're all here together. CCLR can help you redevelop all these sites. And the key to brownfields is actually cleaning up a site is just part of the reason why we do brownfields. The reason why we reuse brownfields is because we want to reuse them for something else, something the community wants. And so, can you go to the next slide? So these brownfields are everywhere. Again, you saw some pictures of them, and there are estimated 500,000 to 1 million around the country. And again, many of them in California are listed on environmental databases, but not all of them are, because a lot of these sites, a site that's vacant and is not generating any income or is a blight to the neighborhood, need not be listed on an environmental database, but you can certainly use Brownfields funding to investigate the sites so that you can reuse them. And our speakers are here to address how you can reuse these for certain uh, purposes. So in our next slide, I'm going to introduce our speakers. And in order, we have our speaker from Fresno State who will be welcoming us and telling us a bit about the latest on opportunity zones, which is one source of funding that has been around, generating a lot of interest the last few months. And then we have a city from the city of Fresno. We'll be talking about area approaches to brownfields and some funding sources. Then we have two speakers from Grid Alternatives, who will speak about solar reuse for communities. And then a speaker from Self-Help Housing will talk about housing and community planning. And then I'll round it up with some information on grants, loans, and other programs. And then we'll end with some question and answer. Again, today's speakers, we have Ismael Herrera with Fresno State, Drew Wilson with the city of Fresno, Elise Hunter and Tom Esqueda with Grid Alternatives, Tom Collishaw with Self-Help Enterprises, and that's me. And so, again, this presentation and people's bios are downloadable from the console. So we have an impressive lineup, but we'd like to get to the content ASAP. So let's hand it over to Ismael.
I think you might still be muted.
Ismael, can you hear us? No, Ismael, we can't hear you. You're muted. So while we're waiting for Ismael, CCLR is working with CSU Fresno and the other CSUs to present this webinar, and we are hoping to spread the word about the brownfields opportunities that are available to folks in the San Joaquin Valley. So Ismael, can you hear us now? Well, while we get Ismael online, maybe we can jump over to our next speaker, Drew, and we will go back to Ismael's slides once Drew is done. So, Drew, can you hear us?
Hello, you guys there?
Yes.
Perfect. Take it away.
All right. Welcome, everybody. My name is Drew Wilson. I'm with the City of Fresno in the Development Resource Management Department, or the Planning Department, or in the Long Range Planning. I'm going to talk about some of the experience we had here using Brownfields Fund, primarily Area-Wide Planning Fund. Go to the next slide, please. So we're relatively new to the process, and with that, we needed to go get as much assistance as possible. So I'm taking some of this information, the next two slides come directly from a technical assistance provider for Brownfields tab providers, Groundwork USA, and I think they sum it up absolutely perfect. So why did we want to go through this process? Is we wanted to make sure we built our capacity for ourselves, along with our capacity with nonprofits, catalyst site owners, property owners, developers. And we wanted to make sure that leadership was shared so that we were working with ourselves, capacity building, but also building capacity with other folks, because we knew this was a process we couldn't go at it alone. And we wanted to make sure that we fostered the relationships that lead to investments and partnerships, and that the vision would be created not by city staff, but by the community, along with the other stakeholders throughout the process. And the hope being that when we do some capacity building and we foster relationships and partnerships, it's a lot easier to go after that new investment, because as we all know, development and investment can take a long time. Next slide. So Groundwork USA has an awesome resource out there. I believe it's linked to this. It's planning with an eye towards implementation. I took some of the key points from that I think the city utilized. And this came from Groundwork USA directly telling us these key points, also working with a variety of other partners that I go to later on. So we wanted to make sure that we had as many folks as we could at the table, and that the engagement process wasn't standard like we've been doing for the last 50 years. We wanted to go to the people. We wanted to make sure it was fun. And as I go to later on, there was a lot of planning fatigue. So we needed it to be creative in the way that we connected with the community. And then also understanding that a lot of the catalyst sites that we identified didn't mean that those property owners were going to be fully engaged in the process, that we needed to find ways to pivot and utilize them the best we could if we had different ideas come up. And then being a municipality and a city, we understand that policy is our key to legislating change. That policy is the core thing that we can come up with. We can create partnerships and we can come up with ideas, but the policy is what helps drive it forward. And we needed to make sure that we constantly had an eye towards implementation. The phrase that I heard and I continue to use is we wanted to create a roadmap to development. And so we needed to layer as many resources and also think, what can we do in the interim? Because again, development takes time. Next slide, please. So throughout the history within the city, we've done a lot of different studies after studies after studies, and plan after plan after plan. And we don't want those to sit on the shelf. As you guys can see, from July of 2011 to a plan that's going to come out next month, the revitalization plan, there's been a lot of talk about what could be done. A lot of this was done with CCLR. Some of this was done with the former redevelopment agency. Some of these were done with Fresno State. All kind of talked about the need for a key focus on the west area, southwest Fresno, which from the West Fresno Brownfields Action Plan, it said that we should go after a grant. And the previous administration applied for the grant and got it. It sat around on the shelf for a reason. If you go to the next slide, we didn't use it for 3 years because we planned, and then planned again. So the project area had a total of 4 different studies that had happened. With the Brownfields area-wide plan being the last one. We had a community plan that happened on the north end of the corridor. We had a complete streets plan for the south end of the corridor, and then the majority of the corridor was covered by a specific plan. We knew that this was happening, and we knew that we were kind of wearing out the community, but we wanted to make sure that we had our land use in place and the vision for the corridor identified through these processes. And so that's why we wait to conduct it. Also, we were afraid to jump in. We didn't really know what we were doing. We had all these other plans going on. This is the planning process we hadn't been a part of. And we were encouraged by a variety of folks, our EPA rep, along with the other tab providers, that, there's no time like the present to learn. Let's go to the next slide. So once we heard about the fact that you could get technical assistance, we went out and got as many as we possibly could. We worked with CCLR. We worked with the CDFA, the Council of Development Finance. We worked with Groundwork USA, Strategic Growth Council, and Weston, which did some phase 1, phase 2. So there's a immense amount of resources out there. And once you learn about them, it is awesome. Every single one of these groups did nothing but give us a bunch of information, help drive the process forward, and wanted to make sure that we had the best product possible, and also did some capacity building throughout that. So I definitely encourage you guys, go out there, go after a grant, and lean into the tab providers, because they are amazing. If you go to the next slide. Groundwork USA kind of helped us set the table for how we were going to conduct outreach, because we knew there was going to be a planning fatigue. One of the great ideas they had was conducting a photo voice. So we worked with local students to create a process where we train them on what are brownfields. We train them on computer software editing for photos. We trained them on photography. We trained them on a variety of topics. And then we went and walked around the project area, and they took photos, and they used those photos to allow them to have a conversation with the community about some of the issues that have arisen because there was a concentration of brownfields in this project area and in their community. And it allowed for the conversation to be started and had in a more artistic manner and to have conversations that were normally difficult. If you go to the next slide. In fact, they were so awesome and it was such a great experience. They were a part of the presentation for the project kickoff and they helped facilitate conversations at this project kickoff. Utilizing them was great. There's still several of them that I keep in contact with and we've kept in the process, and there's a really cool thing that's come from this project at the very end I'll talk about, and a lot of the kids came out and helped with that. Go to the next slide. So understanding that, working with kids and coming up with a creative way to have a conversation about project areas and some of the issues is good, but you also have to understand the context of the people that you're serving. With that, we saw that in our project area, 83% of them were families with children. A good majority of them, higher than the citywide, were Hispanic and Latino. The median income was less, and the population in the area had stayed stagnant, which there's a variety of things you can take from that, but we needed to be conscious of this, and we needed to make sure that the approach we took to getting the community's opinion was well aware of some of the restraints that the community had. If you go to the next slide. So one of the things we did is we wanted to make sure that we went to them and we kill all the barriers in the room. So we went to them with activities, we went to them with presentations, and we went to them with translators, and every time I went to a meeting, I had coffee and pastries. I went to every school in and around the project area. I went to churches. I went to community groups, gave a presentation on what we were asking, and then we laid a big map on the table, and we had them draw all over it of what the issues and opportunities were in their project area, and then have them vote on what they wanted to see. As you can see in the bottom corner there, the top 4 were grocery store, community serving, retail, parking, complete streets. Those are the things that the community wanted to see. And having this information was a great driver for the consultant team to put together the best product that we knew was going to work for the community and also for investment. If you go to the next slide. We also have to be honest with them, and this is what I said at the beginning of every one of the presentations. We're at stage 1. We're just creating the compass of how we're going to get there. This plan is just going to be the roadmap for development, but we still need to get to a point where we have to find funds for remediation. We find funds for development and partners before we even get to a build. So it does take a long time, and you need to be honest with that process. But based off of advice we got from a variety of the tab providers, next slide, we understand that you have to think incrementally and you have to go towards things slowly. So one of the ideas came forward by the consultant team, and then conversations that happen with the community is of finding a place we can activate that becomes a community location, because they wanted park, they wanted retail, they wanted grocery stores. So the idea came of converting with one of the Catalyst site owners a vacant parcel that had been sat vacant for a long time into a plaza space that we could have community events, we could have farmers markets, we could have movies in the park, we could have concerts and the likes. So it started off as a small idea and it has since exploded and become an awesome thing. It's now actually come to fruition. If you go to the next slide, we were the front page of the Fresno Bee not that long ago. We had close to $90,000 in donations to turn this site from a brownfield into a temporary plaza that has a variety of programs already planned with it. We have a farmers market that happens once a month, the second Saturday, come on down, hosted by Food Commons Fresno. We already have into school year celebrations. We have 2 to 3 different fundraisers that are planned on the site. We have already a beginning of the year fundraiser planned. And it's an awesome service that's provided for the community, and it's going to be a great place to go as development comes to fruition and there's different conversation, a place for the community to go to celebrate, to conversate, and to host kind of workshop ideas to make sure that the plan is continued to push along the way. Next slide. That's the end of my presentation. This is one of my favorite photos from the Photo Voice project, and the students say the sign may see end, but you can see the desired path there where people still want to continue because the work is never done. There's always something to be done. My name is Drew Wilson. There's my email. Looks like my phone number was cut off, but it's 559-621-8087. I'd be happy to hear from any of you and answer any questions. Thank you for your time.
And while we try to get Ismael on, and Ismael, please chime in when you get online. There's a question here for you. What resources are needed within the city? So because a lot of these are funded by grants, what resources are needed at the city in order to apply for and implement these grants?
So you need a grant writer. And if you don't have a grant writer, CCLR is an awesome resource to help you throughout that process to review your grant. And once you're successful in getting that grant, really it's a lot of in-kind time. So if you go after the grant, you can use that grant for consultant services if you don't have the capacity within. And then a lot of it's just in-kind services. There is percentages of some grants that allow for you to pay for staff time, but there is a lot of different resources out there for agencies to conduct the outreach, come up with plans for it, which CCLR, Groundwork USA, CDFA, all were instrumental in making sure that we had a good process. So really it's going to be how much time can you dedicate.
And what's next for the city of Fresno as far as brownfields in this neighborhood and perhaps in other places within the city?
So yeah, we kind of were on a path of we're going to use this grant to attend and then see what happens next. But we realized that you can use funds to put you in an opportunity for more funds because the work obviously is never done. So we applied for additional funds, a coalition grant, and part of that is capacity building. We have a coalition with St. Rest County Department of Health, as well as Chinatown Foundation, to go after a $600,000 coalition area-wide planning grant to get a finer look of where some areas we should focus that funds and where can we use the dollars to kind of spur development. So it seems like the possibilities are endless when you get the right people and your ears are open and you listen to other best practices that have happened nationwide with Brownfields funds. There's a variety of things you can do. It's not necessarily the funding gap provider that oftentimes developers and different folks want, but it provides a lot of services that make it the barrier to entry a lot smaller for a lot of public and private investment.
Thank you, Drew. So I think we have Ish on the line now.
You all hear me?
There you are. Yes.
Okay, great. Well, first and foremost, my apologies for the technical difficulties on my end. Just goes to show you that not all millennials are savvy with technology. My presentation, my comments were really meant to be brief and establish a more of a regional platform from which to launch into more specific efforts here in the region. But I'm going to try to not to take too much time and give us enough space to get into those other presentations. As Ignacio mentioned, my name is Ismael Herrera. I'm the executive director for an office housed here at California State University, Fresno. We are the Office of Community and Economic Development. But an important feature and function of our office is we serve as the what is called the Secretariat for a regional initiative called the California Partnership for the San Joaquin Valley. That particular initiative has been around since 2005 and came out of work that this region began with the California governor in that year. Started with Governor Schwarzenegger, continued with Governor Brown, and we're now working with the Newsom administration here in California to keep those efforts going. And it's really exciting times for this region and for much of inland California. Us here in the San Joaquin Valley and our brothers and sisters down in the Inland Empire are really excited about the opportunity to have a governor, have an administration that has from the gate prioritized investment, prioritized development, prioritized attention and resources for inland California, so much so that, clearly stated in their opening remarks in January that, this region and other inland regions of California will no longer be flyover regions in the state. And so our office has really taken the opportunity to provide support to the administration and its cabinet and various offices within that administration to provide a vehicle to be able to work with our partners, our regional stakeholders, to advance their economic development vision, in a vision that's really not top down, but really strives to be bottom up. And we are playing that role in two ways. One, which I'll talk about here briefly, but another thing we're doing with that, with the administration and its representatives, is helping them compile what's being referred to as regional economic regional economic development action plans, or punch lists for short. And so the administration is in the process of acquiring and aggregating these punch lists for each of the identified 14, 15 subregions in California. Those punch lists will be front and center at the 8th Annual California State Economic Summit, which will be taking place for the first time in the San Joaquin Valley, will be taking place in the city of Fresno on November 7th and 8th. And so I welcome any of you who are interested in learning more about this process, this bottom-up approach for regional economic development that the administration is prioritizing. Attend the November 7th and 8th Economic Summit in Fresno, and we'll make sure that Ignacio and CCLR have more information on that to distribute. But the other effort that we're trying to assist with is getting the word out and trying to provide information and answers and being liaisons to the governor's office it's called now the Governor's Office for Economic Impact. Some of you may have known it as GoBiz, but providing support to them and when it comes to opportunity zones and being able to refer projects over to them, but also provide some preliminary answers to questions that people may have, and providing some background on some very superficial level background on the program. And so that's what I'm here to briefly speak to you all about today. Most of you, based on the polling questions earlier, are from within the region and within the state, and then there appear to be about 20% of you who were from outside of the state. So, this may be helpful to you. But as most of you probably know, the Opportunity Zones program is a national program. It's a national tool that has become available through the Federal Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. It's essentially a program that allows communities, investors to work together to try to facilitate investment in places that have been, experience chronic disenfranchisement, disinvestment, that have been, looked over by previous efforts to develop in those particular census tracts. What it does is it allows investors to be able to dedicate their funds into what's called opportunity funds that are set up locally by stakeholders, municipalities, and it allows those investors to invest their resources, and those investments bring with them an opportunity to defer capital gain taxes if the investment is situated in the eligible census tract for 10 years or more. And so it provides a lucrative opportunity for folks to look at communities around the country that are in need of investment and that show a lot of promise for projects that range from affordable housing to industrial, retail, commercial, and everything in between. In the state of California, there's 879 opportunity zones dispersed throughout census tracts that have been identified as communities that are in need of further investment. In the San Joaquin Valley, we have 157 opportunity zones that span our 8-county region, with San Joaquin County up in the north, just south of Sacramento, to Kern County in the south, just north of the Los Angeles Basin, and everything in between. So there's 157 opportunity zones that have been identified here in our region. You heard from Drew Wilson from the city of Fresno. They are one community here in our region that has several of these opportunity zones that are ripe for investment and are situated for attracting investors to the community. There is before I go further, there is a resource page that we help our friends from the state disseminate it to within our region for frequently asked questions, for other details on the program. But that website is https opzones opzones.californiaca.gov, opzones.ca.gov, and we'll get that link to the CCLR team too for the follow-up email that they'll send after this webinar. But if you go to that website, it'll give you the specifics on what California is doing with its guidelines, how they're working in tandem with the federal guidelines, where they're at with the opportunity zones, where investments are occurring, what the protocols are, where those opportunity zones are located. And so it's a very resourceful, very useful website to navigate the opportunity zone program in California. As I was preparing my comments for this webinar, yesterday I actually attended an event where opportunity zones were briefly discussed, and there was a very helpful, very useful handout that that was shared to me by Policy Link that provided a nice overview of the program and how investments should be occurring from an equitable point of reference. And so this is also a document I'm happy to share with the CCLR team and distribute. But essentially, it shares that there's approaches that should be taken when guiding these opportunity zones investments into the eligible census tracts. One, things like equitable growth should be considered. That opportunity zones should leverage tax incentives to ultimately create good jobs, increase economic security and mobility for residents in those communities, and eliminate the racial wealth gap that often afflicts these communities. The projects should ultimately result in jobs that provide wages that support a dignified standard of living with full benefits and workers' rights, and provide safe and healthy working conditions. And so equitable growth, making sure that everybody can participate in the prosperity of these investments should be front and center. And also that whatever development occurs should not induce displacement. In addition to bringing economic opportunity and vitality to disinvested communities, development projects and opportunity zones should foster greater housing affordability and security for families, especially those that are most at risk of displacement. And really try to provide safeguards to gentrification. And so those are other things that I think should drive investment and drive the conversations between local municipalities, local governments, and those that are looking to invest. That those are conversations that should be had. And I know, and having heard the administration talk about some of these things recently, I know that those are priorities that they share as well. But the third is that the investments should also provide an opportunity for healthy communities to be developed, where more opportunity exists for residents. That investments should drive equitable growth and prosperity for existing low-income residents in these communities. And looking at the census tracts, you'll see, and if you do an cross analysis with demographics, you'll see that a lot of these communities are communities of color in which these zones are located. So projects should try to increase services available to these vulnerable populations. Services such as affordable transportation options, healthcare facilities. You heard about farmers markets and healthy food retail. Those are things that should also be provided through these programs, as well as quality educational services. These three categories: equitable growth, development without displacement, healthy communities of opportunity, should move these investments beyond just transactions and into transformations of local communities that reside within these zones. And so I'm not going to take any more time going into any more detail on some of the other recommended actions for various stakeholders. I'll share that in the form, in the document that I'll send to the CCLR team. But just know that as you build a capital stack for these projects within opportunity zones, that tools like Brownfield funding and other types of federal sources should be considered and should be pursued to help fill the gaps on some of these projects that investment dollars may not always complete the entirety of the project. And so it's a thing that's prudent among communities to be ready to try to bring to the table additional sources of funding like Brownfields funding to try to close those deals and try to find the necessary resources to bring those projects to fruition. And so with that, I want to turn it over back to the CCLR team. I do want to quickly note that we do have an event coming up through one of our other initiatives that ties into what we're talking about here today, and the focus is more on affordable housing here in the San Joaquin Valley. This event's taking place on June 12th. next month. It'll be here in the city of Fresno at a very dynamic, very neat project, affordable housing project in the city, in the central part of the city. We'll be talking about opportunities and potential investment opportunities that reside in the 8-county region. And so if you're interested in continuing this discussion with us on an 8-county level here in the San Joaquin Valley, we invite you to attend this event on June 12th, and then again, join us for the statewide economic summit on November 7th and 8th here in the city of Fresno in November.
Thanks so much, Ish. We have questions, but we'll take it at the end of the panel. And while we're transitioning to the next presenter slides, which is the grid alternatives, just as a background, both environmental justice, which Ismael mentioned, and renewable energy are both priorities under the New Build Act, which is the basis for the EPA grants, the prioritization of EPA grants. So that's for that reason that we are featuring grid alternatives. And there's a connection here as well, as grid alternatives is one of the potential partners for the St. Rest development, which Drew brought up. So it's kind of all it all comes together, and the speakers are addressing all of these potential partners for your Brownfields project. So with that, I'll hand it off to Elise and Tom.
Hey, this is Elise from Grid Alternatives. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks for having me this morning. Lots of very interesting information being shared. I'm going to kick us off by giving us a little context about Grid Alternatives and who we are, and provide a little bit more of an overview of some of the statewide low-income solar programs and how those might tie together with Brownfields renewable energy redevelopment in the San Joaquin Valley. And then I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Tom Esqueda after that, who is the executive director of the Grid Fresno office, who's going to talk about some of the work and local impacts that Grid has had within the region. So next slide. So this is just the quick agenda for today. I'm going to talk about Grid, low-income solar programs with a focus on community solar, because I think that's the probably most opportune program for brownfield redevelopment and then impact in Central Valley. Next slide. So for those of you who may not be familiar with Grid Alternatives, we're the nation's largest nonprofit solar installer, founded back in 2001. We are headquartered in California. We have offices all over California, including Fresno. We also have offices and operations in Colorado, in DC, in the Mid-Atlantic region. And internationally, we have done projects in Nicaragua, Nepal, and Mexico. So our presence is growing. We focus on making renewable energy accessible to underserved communities. So many low-income communities, also tribes, working within kind of the statewide disadvantaged communities, which some of you may be familiar with, communities that have a high pollution burden. And in each one of our installations, we wrap in workforce training and development to make sure that the career benefits of solar and renewable energy are also provided and accessible within communities, in addition to serving families with renewable energy. So that's kind of the installer side of Grid. We're also a very active advocate in the policy space, which is kind of where I'm going to focus on for my presentation. The reason we're able to provide these underserved communities with rooftop solar and increasingly community solar is because of policies and programs that decision makers make to provide that opportunity. So next slide. So just some barriers to low-income renewable energy, and many of you may be familiar with this, and this is really kind of the need for advocacy. there are a lot of barriers that the low-income communities face that the general market generally doesn't face. The biggest one is financial. So low-income customers often have the sensitivity to upfront costs, can't make an investment on clean energy, even if there would be a return on investment, they just don't have the funds available to pay upfront. Oftentimes, there's also a challenge in even paying on an ongoing basis. Many developers and sort of stakeholders in the financial world do not consider low-income customers to be creditworthy necessarily. So it can be hard to obtain loans or other types of financing. Same thing with tax incentives for renewable energy. Low-income customers tend to not have the tax liability that would really allow them to take advantage. And then there's also the situation that many low-income families rent their homes rather than own their homes, which could potentially be a barrier to rooftop solar. However, I think there's a good tie-in to community solar because renters can subscribe to community solar projects without having to own their homes and still access the benefits of solar. And I'll get into that a little more later in the presentation. Same thing with structural barriers. I mean, you could have a homeowner that owns their property, but if the roof is not in good enough condition to support solar, it can be a barrier to rooftop solar as well. Finally, I'll touch on an unfortunate pattern in low-income communities where sometimes bad actors and predatory lenders will try to take advantage of folks, and so there's just a natural distrust of salespeople, sometimes a distrust of governments and folks and utilities. So that can be something that needs to be worked around. Really building trust with the communities is important. And finally, just language and energy literacy barriers. It's important to meet people where they're at when you talk to them about these energy programs, and to communicate with them in the language that they speak at home. So next slide. Just go through some of the policy objectives that the grid policy team focuses on, really trying to ensure that economic justice and access and energy burden reduction are incorporated into all of these low-income programs, and with an eye to climate and environmental justice. I thought Ismael gave a really good list of some of the overall goals with opportunity zones, and we have similar anti-displacement, environmental justice goals with our policy advocacy work as well. So next slide. So these are the key programs and initiatives that Grid Alternatives generally focuses on. We have started out as a single-family solar company since 2001. That was really Grid's bread and butter. We actually administer a statewide single-family solar program called the Single Affordable Solar Homes Program, or SASH. So we both install and administer that program. Increasingly, though, we have a focus on multifamily rooftop solar and community solar, which really helps us get to the rental market and can help with land redevelopment too. And under those types of programs, customers can receive a solar subscription, but they don't have to own their. And then we also work with tribes, which tend to have distinct needs when it comes to renewable energy. They're often at the end of distribution lines and have a need for reliability as well as bill savings. And then I mentioned our international programs as well, which I won't go into a lot of detail in for this call. So next slide. Just a bit about Grid's impact. Won't read all these numbers off the screen, but you can see we're very proud of the amount of solar that we've installed, the lifetime savings we provide our customers. Of course, the workforce training arm, that is always a priority with Grid, and that actually looks different in each region. Tom can talk a little bit more about that for the Central Valley, and the climate impact that we have. Next slide. So this is where I'm going to spend a little bit more time because it could be interesting to the developers and local governments on the phone. Just an overview of low-income solar programs. and the potential land redevelopment benefits of these. So I talked a little bit about the single family low income solar program that we administer and install under. There's a new iteration of that program that recently passed called DAC-SASH. It's Disadvantaged Communities Single Affordable Solar Homes Program, and that provides upfront incentives for low-income homeowners living in these high pollution burden communities to install solar directly on their homes. We're going to be administering and installing that, and we've been able to provide participating customers with greater than 50% bill savings usually, and we typically see up to 80% savings. So huge impact to folks to reduce their bills. Multifamily, there's been an exciting development too. There's a new program that was just developed last year called SOMA. That stands for Solar on Multifamily Affordable Housing. That is the biggest multifamily low-income program that has ever been passed in the country. It's a $100 million a year program for 10 years, so that means $1 billion of incentives upfront just for affordable housing solar. And the great part of that is that there's assurances within that program that the low-income tenants are going to be getting significant savings. So they have to receive at least half the solar credits just for the tenants, and the tenants have to receive 100% of the solar value that's dedicated to them. So that means they're protected against landlords raising the rents and that sort of thing. Finally, there's two community solar programs that the state passed last year. Those are structured a little bit differently, but they do focus on low-income and disadvantaged community customers. And through this program, the utilities are directly going to work with developers to solicit solar projects. And the participants, meaning the subscribers of community solar, can get a 20% discount off of their electricity bill just for subscribing. And the great thing about this one is that for consumers, it's really, really easy to subscribe. There's solar going up in your community. You can learn about it through the utility or through the developer, and customers can subscribe. Next slide. So focusing then a little bit more on the community solar program, because this is really, I think, the greatest opportunity for brownfield redevelopment, and the importance of community solar. Community solar, of course, provides more equitable access to solar benefits. The two programs that passed last year, they're called the Community Solar Green Tariff as one program, and then Disadvantaged Communities Green Tariff is the other program. But they're kind of twin programs. They have yet to be launched, but we expect that they'll be launched in the coming year. I think it's a good start for community solar in California, but I do want to highlight there are a couple of challenges. The siting rules are fairly strict for these programs. So for the Community Solar Green Tariff, for example, the project has to go up within 5 miles of the community, which in some cases may be possible, but in other cases, may be hard to find the land available. But that's why I think we should be looking at brownfields. And that 20% savings for participating low-income customers, again, it's a great start, but in Grid's mind, we would like something that is more comparable to what folks can get with rooftop solar, like 50% or 80% savings. Lastly, I wanted to highlight some community solar that will be happening in the San Joaquin Valley. There's a proceeding at the California Public Utilities Commission called the San Joaquin Valley Proceeding, where the CPUC recently decided that several rural communities in the San Joaquin Valley who currently don't have access to natural gas and are burning propane, very expensive fuel, will be switched over and have the option to electrify their homes. So go all electric, and to offset their electricity use, to be able to subscribe to new community solar projects that will be going up in their communities. We think this is a great landmark project that the Commission has worked on. It's providing a more affordable and cleaner energy solution to the San Joaquin Valley communities. And of course, switching over to electricity means your electricity use goes up, but subscribing to community solar can help offset the costs of that electricity. So the timeline of that is that there will be pilot projects happening in 11 communities within the San Joaquin Valley over the next 3 years. And those pilots are going to be evaluated. But after that period, the commission is actually looking at 178 communities across the San Joaquin Valley to do similar pilot projects with. So it's going to be scaled up a lot. We're really excited to see what happens. Feel free to reach out to me if you're curious or would like more info. So I'm going to pass it off to my colleague, Tom.
Thank you, Elise, and good morning to everybody there. Next slide. Yeah, I just want to speak about our office here. As Elise mentioned, GRID is basically California-centric in regards to our offices. I'm the executive director of the Fresno office that serves 10 counties here in the San Joaquin Central Valley. So as far south as Kern County, as far north as Stanislaus are the 10 counties we serve. One of the things that we're proud of impacting is not only do we do rooftop solar for the benefit of the families to save them dollars on their energy bill with sustainable renewable energy and rooftop solar, but we have learned in the 10 years we've been here that there is a need for living wage jobs. And our work is predicated, as Elise said, as a nonprofit with volunteers working alongside our construction team and installing the systems. So what we learned was, we're agri-based here, and there are a lot of people that are looking for more of a steady income, and solar continues to grow. So in February, we launched a standard curriculum for installation basic training called IBT 200. And we're proud of that because we're a triple bottom line company with people, planet, and employment as the triple bottom line. And here we are looking at employment. So since February, I'm proud to say we've had 30 students graduate from our 5-week course, and 11 have attained jobs in the growing solar field. In fact, this Friday, we're having a cohort graduate with us. And on graduation day on Friday, we have what's called I call it the NFL with combines, where we're actually having companies come out and they're going to review and observe some of the skills that these individuals have grown to learn in the 5 weeks. And last time we had this, we had 3 that were offered jobs on the site. So we're very proud of this program as we continue to serve the community here in Central Valley. Next slide. We're also proud that we do a solar spring break, where we have been blessed with the college students from all over the United States that join us instead of going to solar break and our spring break and doing some other things that many college students do. They decide to give back to the community, and they have come out to Fresno and work with the Central Valley team for a week. Many of them come out to enhance their classroom studies and learn about sustainable renewable energy. I've been benefited from the fact that they're so enthusiastic. It's so fun to see these folks. And we've had people from Duke University, East Bay Hayward, the University of Nebraska, and Rice University in Texas most recently. And at the end of the week, it is great to see how they enthusiastically understand how their classroom studies really work on the ground level, and they bless the families, they get to know the families, and they realize all their work is going to go to really help the bottom line, and that's families and underserved areas with lower energy bills. Next slide. We also, as Elise mentioned, we have pivoted to grid alternatives. We're now working on multifamily projects that are primarily, actually they are there to serve the lower income community. We're proud to have growing relationships and working with the Fresno Housing Authority and now with Self-Help Enterprise here in the Valley by providing solar on the rooftops of their apartment buildings that are going to lower the energy bill, not only for the complex, and of course, serve the tenants with lower energy costs. This also provides us opportunities for our IBT 200 students, not only just to learn rooftop solar in single family homes, but also to learn how to approach solar rooftop on multifamily apartment projects. Next slide. Our solar futures, when we came to be here in Fresno, we realized that there's opportunities to work with high schools. I'm proud to say we have relationships now with 31 high schools throughout the 10 counties we serve. We actually have a classroom curriculum that we integrate with the instructors that are teaching the high school juniors and seniors in regards to sustainable renewable energy. So we work with the instructor, go out to the high schools for a 5-day week for 1 to 2 hour classrooms teachings. And at the end of our time out there, we have the students assist us with the installation. So what we've also found out is not only does it really help the students, it helps us because it's a way of marketing our program to reach out to more people that have not heard about us as a nonprofit company, because we don't have the dollars and the financial wherewithal to do any advertising and billboards and commercials, et cetera. So we have grown to serve our valley through word of mouth and just basically pounding the pavement, so to speak, and introducing ourselves and what we do, create alternatives to families. One quick story, one of the individuals that we met at a high school that we worked with is now on our construction team. She's been with us 3 years. She graduated from Porterville High School, went on to Fresno State, and she is now one of our site designers. So we're proud of the fact that we kind of grow our own. Next slide. Oh, that probably should have been taken out. Sorry about that. That's just me and my construction manager, David Griffith, kind of relaxing during a break on installation. Next slide. Here's our information to contact me in regards to, and Elise, is any questions you might have as a follow-up. One thing I do want to say is, I don't know if it's the next slide or maybe it was out of order in regards to our impact in Central Valley, but I will go ahead and share that with you. Our impact is, of course, cleaning the air. And as you know, in the Central Valley, we all, as residents here, suffer from poor air quality. So the more we do solar, the more we enhance the cleaning of the air. And not only that, but like I said, I look at the bottom line in regards to employment and helping people with their bills and basically putting more money out in the community to do the things they need to do to serve their family. But one of the things is our construction team has now grown to 20. And I'm proud to say that 18 of the people that now work in our solar construction team came through us through our partnerships with job training organizations, or came to us as volunteers looking to get employment in the growing solar field. So I am very proud of the fact that we have not only working here in the community, but we've actually grown along with the community with the people we serve. This year, we will, out of this office alone, have installed the 2,000th home by the end of December. We're very proud of that fact. And you know, we're proud of the fact that this year we have done 5 multifamily projects for affordable housing developers. We're also doing mission-aligned, working with mission-aligned nonprofits, such as food banks and other organizations that are very similar to GRID and the population they serve. So we not only design the system, we install the system, we work with volunteers. Again, we provide training opportunities for people to gain a living wage employment here in doing solar. So we are proud of the work we've done here in Central Valley Fresno because of the collaborations we've sustained, the relationships we're building, and the partnerships that are growing. And it was mentioned earlier about working with St. Rest Baptist. Drew, I thank you for inviting us to be a part of that at the table. We know we're going to be working with you and the St. Rest Baptist Church Group. And I think Tom Collishaw, you're next, and you know how much we enjoy working with Self-Help Enterprise. And with that, that's the conclusion of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. And Tom Collishaw, please.
Great.
Handing it off to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I'll try to power through this. I was asked to talk from our perspective as a nonprofit developer in the San Joaquin Valley. And just very quickly, Self-Help Enterprises, we've been around for almost 55 years. And our mission is to work together to build, sustain healthy homes and communities. We do that through a variety of programs, including housing production programs. We've been involved in over 15,000 units of affordable multifamily and single-family homes, of which about 8,000 of those have been newly constructed units. The rest have been rehab opportunities. We also do some infrastructure work in many of the disadvantaged communities of the Valley. We do other housing services. And of late, we have been doing some community resilience work with leadership development and involving disadvantaged communities in conversations about water, about disaster preparedness, and those kinds of things. And all of these endeavors promote opportunity and sustainability in these communities. So next, I just added a picture of a recent infill development, affordable rental housing development we did in Dinuba, just for some idea of the kinds of projects we're building these days. Next. So the housing picture, very briefly, in the San Joaquin Valley from our perspective is that there's really unprecedented opportunity at the moment. The combination of new resources through some voter approved measures, as well as a governor who's seems to be quite serious about increasing housing opportunities, has made for really the best environment we have to create new units in decades. We still, in the San Joaquin Valley, we have pockets of places that still lack the political will, and there are some barriers to that construction. And there's also just a general lack of capacity of folks like us who produce these kinds of projects. We also have a burgeoning and visible homeless problem throughout the valley, and are having conversations with cities and counties that we've really never had before, because everybody realizes that it's a growing problem. And we have an affordability problem here. People look at California, tend to look at the coastal communities and the kind of costs that they have, but I always say there's no difference if you make $60,000 a year and can't afford an apartment in San Francisco than the family who makes $22,000 a year, a working family in Fresno who can't really afford a $1,000 a month rent. So we have our own affordability problem. And we do see that there's a new possibility with a bubble around housing prices and values here in the Valley, and due to scarcity of product and locally rising prices. And we're also finding in building new projects that there's not as much a regional difference as we once had in the costs of developing units. The lack of construction folks that are available to do construction has really impacted our areas, and we see dramatically rising prices. So next. And of course, we work with a number of partners. Tom Esqueda just mentioned folks like Grid Alternatives are important to us. We also work with cities and counties, increasingly transportation partners. We've fully utilized the new cap and trade funds, and that's really enhanced our relationship with transportation planners and providers, including CalVans, the folks at the CalVan Authority. And then we're growing our relationships with permanent supportive housing service providers, folks that do work with formerly homeless people to provide the kind of services they need to be successful in new living environments. And of course, our funding partners for capital and other things. We have investors in virtually all of our rental housing projects through the low-income housing tax credit, and we use state and federal resources. So next, to talk a little bit about infill. We're doing both. We're doing single-family infill by purchasing existing lots or finished and unfinished lots. And we've done that extensively in recent years in all of the communities that are mentioned on this slide. And these ends up being hundreds of building lots, actually. We have current efforts underway in Fresno, Hanford, and Visalia for these kinds of opportunities. And larger rental infill properties we're working at in over half a dozen communities right now. We have an active pipeline of projects. And I will say that key funding programs that we utilize are driving some of this infill development, or certainly enhances the opportunity. One is the Affordable Housing Sustainability Sustainable Communities Program, the Infill Infrastructure Grant Program, and even the 9% low-income housing tax credit program actually advantages infill development. And we are doing a pilot effort around accessory dwelling units in the city of Clovis by providing financing to people through a program with California Housing Finance Agency. And that's drawing a lot of interest, and we're anxious to see how that works out. So next, just got a few pictures for you to look at. That's an infill project, that completed infill, a single family project that we did in Clovis. Next, give you some sense of a master planned infill project that we have in Goshen. Basically, the brown area in the middle there will include 89 units of single family homes and over 150 rental units, affordable rental units, and then a 6-acre commercial piece. Next, and have a nice example of a rental project in Lamont in Kern County that's was completed on an infill site as well. So next, so talk a little bit about brownfields and reuse opportunities. That has not, I can't say that that's been a focus of ours, but when we think about it, we've been involved in some brownfields, sometimes inadvertently. We had a situation in Lemoore, and we've got a underground storage tank and a project that we started construction on in Fresno just recently. So I will say that our brownfield developments tend to be inadvertent rather than planned. We are looking at specific sites actually in Visalia and made proposals to develop them, and those would be true brownfield sites. And one of those is actually a bridge housing project for people that are waiting for permanent supportive housing units, but have no place to go currently because they're homeless. Next, and this is my last slide, just a quick commercial about what we would need to be able to do more and create more of an impact on the affordable housing crisis and needs in the valley. We can certainly utilize local cities and counties to help identify sites that are aligned with their housing element and where there would be funding opportunities because they're around services, and this would include infill sites. We do have a challenge around density in the valley because the built environment is not very dense, and most of the projects these days that we are proposing are much higher in density. Some of the pictures you've seen are at 20 units to the acre or more, which for many small incorporated communities is much more than what's in the built environment. So that's a challenge. We'd like to see public agencies take a more active role in developing these plans and these pipelines for future projects. We need support in not in my backyard environments, which happen frequently, particularly on infill sites where there are neighbors. Neighbors are always fear what they don't know. So we spend a lot of time trying to educate and being very transparent about our plans with local neighborhoods when we plan to build. And we could use some additional capital resources. Stuff costs more money these days, and we need to be nimble and flexible and be able to pursue projects quickly. So that's my presentation. Thank you so much for listening.
And thank you, Tom. And we talk a lot about financial resources. As I had mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, there was a webinar last week where the EPA, the Department of Toxic Substances Control, and the water boards discuss the brownfields funds available to California communities. And we will provide a link to that webinar when it becomes available, and it will be in the follow-up email. Again, and the next slide would be those are brownfields funds that were discussed last week, and there are leveraged funds. And the opportunity zones are actually one of those funds that are leveraged with brownfields redevelopment. There are many other funds that can be can be used, and we list a few of them there. And so we have just a couple of questions here for Tom. So when you talk about density, and you said 20 units per acre, what do you find? 20 units per acre. That's townhouses, right? And where have you actually exceeded by far what the density in the community is? An example where you went way beyond the FAR that the community was accustomed to.
Yeah, so we often get for our multifamily development properties that are often like medium density residential zone sites, and then we have to utilize often the density bonus law that allows you to go, because of the housing we're building, up to 30% higher than the original density. And we've had at least 2 sites where to get to 20%, which was the minimum density to be funded through the cap and trade program in these communities, we had to fully utilize the density bonus entitlements to increase the density.
Thank you. And for Tom Esqueda, your slides, Grid Alternatives plans to do community solar. Have you done any in the recent past? And do you see brownfield sites as possible locations for community solar?
We have not done any community solar as of yet, but I've always been an advocate of reusing brownfield sites, and so we do anticipate getting involved with doing solar on those.
So really, those are the questions we had. If there are any other questions, type them in. I don't think we actually have any more. So with that, thank you for calling in. We went a little bit over, but thank you for sticking with us. And please look for the follow-up email where we will send the links to the resources we mentioned. And I look forward to seeing you at one of those conferences that Ish mentioned at Brownfields 2019 and other events. And also look out for future CCLR webinars. Thank you so much again for joining us.